shores of Nova Scotia, to the rocks of Newfoundland, to the streets of Quebec City, I'll be your wandering man. From the Gulf Stream of St. Lawrence out to the Prairie Song, up in the Rocky Mountains, I'll be wandering on. I'm wandering on. I'm wandering on. Singing your song. I'm wandering on.
I'm wandering my way to WATERTON Lakes National Park in southwestern Alberta. I've come here to see if I can learn the true story of a mountain man by the name of Kootenai Brown. He came here to these mountains in the late 1800s and he said, "This is the land I've dreamed of." And then he worked hard to make this one of Canada's first national parks. Why don't you come along with me and let's see if we can learn the true story of the men for the mountains. Come along.
George Kootenai Brown was born in Ireland in 1839. As a young man, he served with the British Army in India. And in 1865, when he was just 26 years old, he traveled the old Indian Trail over South Kootenai Pass. And there, for the first time, he gazed upon the mystical beauty of WATERTON Lakes. After seeing the astonishing power of this area, he became determined that one day he would return here. To learn more about Kootenai Brown, I met with one of Western Canada's most popular writers, Sid Marty.
Kootenai Brown was a neat old guy. He was a real true mountain man of the sort of North American Western stripe. He had been a gold seeker. When he first came into this country, he came over the mountains from the BC gold fields and saw WATERTON for the first time and said, "This is the country of my dreams. I'm going to come back here someday and I'm going to live and spend my days here." And I think Brown wound up at that point down in Montana. And so it's a while before he comes back up to Canada. And when he does come back up, it's running away from a problem he got into down there where someone got wound up with Brown's knife stuck in him somewhere. Brown had to get out of the country and came up to Canada and basically never went back to the United States after that. Brown had the real love of the place. He knew that it was going to get trashed if it wasn't protected and set aside. He knew that it would just be overrun with homesteaders eventually and poachers and everything else. Then, of course, Brown became the first ranger and superintendent of WATERTON National Park after that. He was a very colorful person, you know, to see this guy in buckskins ride up and tell you to put that fire out.
So the rangers were like park wardens, early park wardens.
Yeah, that's right. He would have been the sort of fire and game warden or whatever the designation they gave him back then. They always use this term warden in the national parks, but in our provincial parks in Alberta, they're rangers.
Kootenai Brown became the key player in the evolution of the park's preservation policies. Already a legend in southern Alberta, this small 70-year-old man with a white handlebar mustache did everything he could for his park. In 1914, he recommended that the park should be significantly increased in size, from its initial 35 square kilometers to 1,095 square kilometers. A well-educated and well-spoken Kootenai Brown managed to get this idea across to the government in Ottawa, and his proposal was accepted. But the same year, it was decided that George Kootenai Brown was too old for such a responsible post and that a younger man was needed. Kootenai Brown left his post as park superintendent, but he continued to live in his cabin in the wilderness of Waterton Lakes and be the mountain man that he was. He continued to look after the things that concerned him in his beloved Waterton as a park ranger. And all this at the tender age of 75. Kootenai Brown led an exciting life, which many can admire, but few can emulate. He was a soldier and a deckhand, a gold prospector in the Caribou, and a pony express rider. He was a scout and a bison hunter. He was a wolf hunter and a trader. But the most important role of all was being the father of Waterton National Park, where he lived since 1878. Kootenai Brown basically shaped this whole area through his communications with Ottawa. He continuously expressed his concerns and thoughts regarding the park's future to Canadian governments throughout the years, and he was heard. But everyone dies, even the great ones. George Kootenai Brown died in 1916, and he was buried in Waterton along the west shore of beautiful Knights Lake, lying next to his two wives. Canada's Waterton National Park shares a border with the Glacier National Park of the United States of America. Both of them share the same beautiful lake. In the 1930s, these two parks were united as one. They became the first and only international peace park in the world. By the side of the Waterton Lake, next to some adventurous tourists who weren't afraid of the always cold water, I met with Ray Juff and Chris Morrison, the authors of Waterton and Glacier in a Snap. I talked with them about how the International Peace Park first came into being.
Kootenai Brown was in charge of the park as a forest ranger, and his counterpart in Glacier Park, Albert Reynolds, was in the northernmost part of the park. And they used to get together in the wintertime and chew the fat, talk about common problems, talk about administration, talk about game protection, all of that sort of things. They felt that because the two parks share so many aspects, this is all common geography, it's all common wildlife, it's all common trees, plants, bushes, water, you name it. Why don't we just have one park instead of two? That was their suggestion. Took 2 decades, and on June 18, 1932, this officially became the world's first international peace park.
I asked Chris what she thinks today's message of the International Peace Park is.
The message of an international peace park, especially now with terrorists doing things in the world that are quite nasty, is that there can be places of peace and friendship. There can be people who get together with common bonds and think about things that are productive and beneficial and cooperate with one another. I think that's the real message of the International Peace Park.
Then I asked Chris and Ray what created their personal, lifelong affection for Waterton Lakes.
One of the abiding things about Waterton Lakes National Park, in the town site particularly, is the drinking water is spectacular. You cannot find a better cup of coffee, you cannot find a better glass of water than is found here in Waterton Lakes National Park. Something as basic as that is just priceless to me, and the water comes from deep wells. The backcountry is absolutely fantastic. There are smells, there are sights, there are sounds that you won't experience anywhere else.
You soon learn that there's just so much to discover here. It may be a small park physically, but there are just so many folds and in the mountains, little places to go, and it entices you. You keep going back trying to discover something new. The scenery, even just from the main valley, is spectacular. When you get into some of the smaller places, even more so.
It changes by the hour and it changes by the season. The light in this park is just ever changing, and you can look at a mountain at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and look at the same mountain at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you see different things.
The light on the lake is similar. The lake will change color with the day. On an overcast day, it may be a dark steel gray, ominous, along with the clouds. On a bright day, it goes to a blue-green, all because of the silt in the water from brought down by the mountain streams. Other times, the lake can be white, foamy, with the wind that blows up the valley at incredible speeds.
At the end of our talk, I asked Ray what was his favorite memory of Waterton.
Probably my favorite memory of the park was being here before the tourists arrive. Obviously, there are people who live here year-round, but to arrive early in the season, in my case, it was very early May, before the tourist season picks up, which is normally about the Victoria Day weekend. And it snowed. And unless you are a winter skier, a cross-country skier, you seldom see the park at that time of year. The majority of tourists arrive in that short summer season. So just to be here then, the quiet, the still, the snow falling, the big fluffy flakes, it was awesome, beautiful. You just stopped and you had to look, stare at what you saw, realizing that very few people see that.
To deepen my understanding of the men for the mountains, I knew that I would have to become one. So I embarked on a 2-day journey on horseback into the Waterton Mountains, where I had planned to meet with a modern-day mountain man, Dwayne Barris, the former chief naturalist of Waterton Park. My guide, Jeff, was an experienced cowboy and outfitter, so I knew I was in good hands as I headed into this rocky and mountainous environment. After a half day of travel, we met some backpackers, and to my surprise, they turned out to be our American friends. This was Annette with her 3 sons. I knew exactly how to greet them in our beautiful country.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all your sons command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
After performing our national anthem, I had a little chat with Annette.
So Annette, where are you from?
From Springfield, Illinois.
And where did you just hike from?
We just came from Twin Lakes.
What was it like up there?
It was beautiful. We jumped in, took a little bath. Kids had a great time. I only go halfway in. Those guys usually go all the way in.
How does it feel up here on the top of it?
Oh, it's beautiful. Anywhere up here is beautiful. I tell you what's been really fun to see, and it's been beautiful, is your meadows are so lush. The flowers have been great. It's been awesome.
What do you think about Glacier Waterton as the International Peace Park?
It's wonderful. It's great. It's a nice bridge between the two countries, and hopefully more people will take advantage of it.
With this wonderful thought echoing through my mind, I said goodbye to Annette, and she went on with her hike. And I went on with my ride. The views were astonishing. The surrounding wilderness was beautiful. At one point, my horse and I got rather tired, but we soon got our second wind and were galloping towards our destination at a good speed. Hours later, we found ourselves in the birthplace of the Men for the Mountains, and I met Dwayne Barris for the first time.
Hi, Dwayne. Well, Dwayne Barris, right? Right. Wiz Bryant. Pleasure to meet you, sir. See, hi, Jeff.
So we're finally here where the Men for the Mountains come, Dwayne.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Without wasting any time, I said goodbye to my guide Jeff, and Dwayne and I went off to see the surrounding beauty. We climbed up near the Great Divide, and Dwayne gave me a wonderful tour of the area. At the end of our ride, we came to a beautiful serene lake, and I decided then and there that this would be the very best spot to conduct our interview.
Well, we're at Lone Lake, just behind me here. Lone Lake is in WATERTON Lakes National Park. It's right underneath the Continental Divide. And this ridge that you see here, the skyline actually is the Continental Divide. Wow. From that point in the sky there, the ground slopes away to the west, and all of the snow, all of the rain, all of the water on the other side flows into British Columbia and ultimately into the Pacific Ocean.
You spent most of your life here. What does WATERTON mean to you? And why did you end up spending so much time here?
Well, for a lot of reasons, I guess, because I like the place. It feels like home. There's such an abundance of floral species, bird species, insect species, and everything that come together in WATERTON. It's always said by botanists and others that we reach the northern extent of southern species, and we reach the southern extent of northern species in WATERTON. And so with those two life zones overlapping, we just have a tremendous abundance of everything here.
People like Kootenai Brown, there's a tradition that's carried on through people like yourself. What is your hope for the future of WATERTON Lakes?
Well, I hope that WATERTON continues to be one of our special protected national parks in Canada, and I don't see any reason why it will not be. It's heavily used. We need to be mindful of using all of our national parks in a way that's compatible with them, to keep our trails simple, to keep the resources that we put in the backcountry simple, but yet adequate for the people that need to use them and experience a backcountry adventure.
Watching the wolves in the misty rain, hanging out of their den till they come back again. They bound through the mountains, so wild and free. Watching the wolves, watching me. Now the trail is muddy and the battle is long. Can we save the Rockies with the words of a song. See Kootenai Brown gaze down from high on the cliff. Will we open our eyes? The grizzlies survive, will even be missed. And we're watching the wolves in the misty rain, hanging out at their den till they come back again. They bound through the mountains, so wild and free, watching the wolves, watching the wolves, watching me. Now this wild valley, it's still intact, but a minding road's coming. Can we turn them back? See the grizzly bear fishing, he's sniffing the breeze. Then he jumps through the air, the shakes everywhere, as quick as you please. And he's watching the wolves in the misty rain, hanging out at their den till they come back again. He'll bound through the mountains, so wild and free, watching the wolves, watching the wolves, watching me. See Kootenai Brown gaze down from high on the cliffs. Will we open our eyes? The grizzlies survive, will even be missed. It was time to leave Waterton National Park. A beautiful sunset was making the country look like a painting by our beloved group of 7. I was thinking about Kootenai Brown and how this one man had managed to save all of this magnificent wilderness for us and for all of the generations yet to come. But then I heard a new song in the wind, and I knew it was time to wander on.